Welcome to Talk Across America. I'm Doug Miles, and we're here in beautiful Sarasota, Florida. And joining us now, great to welcome to our book segment today. It's a very interesting book this man has written, maybe a little bit queasy. If you're a little queasy, you may want to have a little caution here, but it's a great book if you're interested in the history of medicine. It's called The Mystery of the Exploding Teeth and Other Curiosities from the History of Medicine. We're joined today by Thomas Mars. He's over in the UK today, so we welcome him from overseas. And Thomas, good to talk with you. How are you?
Hello, very well, thanks. Hope you are.
Yeah, good to have a chance to talk with you. I had an opportunity to read through the book, and my mom was a nurse, so I've heard a lot of medical stories, but you've got some that I think would even make her surprised. I was surprised, too, so it's a very interesting book.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Sorry, I hope it didn't make you too queasy.
No, I've heard a lot of things, but boy, there was some. This is primarily, I guess, from mostly, the 18th and 19th century as the history of medicine, so I tell you, I'm amazed that people even survived back then from what they did medically. It's astonishing what they would do.
It certainly is, yes. And actually, one of the things I learned from it is that even when doctors didn't do anything, it's surprising how often patients got better just under their own steam. So one of the things I learned was really how resilient the human body is, even if it doesn't get any treatment at all.
I was going to say that, some of these operations that you talk about, that people survived, or even whatever medical treatment they had, and it's amazing, like you said, that they could survive from it and go on to have relatively normal lives. I think there's one story that surprised me, was about an operation, I guess a chest operation, and the person being operated on had no anesthesia at all, right?
Yeah, there's this amazing story from the 1850s, which in fact is a period after anesthetics had been discovered. So anesthesia, ether and chloroform entered surgical armory in the late 1840s. And this operation, which took place in the 1850s, was a man he'd been involved in a shooting accident. It was an antique cannon that he and his friends had been playing with, and it exploded. He ended up with a shard of metal actually underneath his heart, so buried in his chest. And the surgeon decided not to give him an anesthetic because in those days patients often stopped breathing if they were given chloroform or ether, and because he was operating on the chest, there was a real danger that this might happen and he would just suffocate on the table. So without even giving him an anesthetic, he opened up his chest and the ribs and spent almost 2 hours looking for this shard of metal somewhere underneath the lungs, and it turned out underneath the heart as well. But imagine the experience of undergoing that procedure without even anesthetic to knock you out is kind of unthinkable.
It's amazing, and he went on to survive. I believe he said he got married after that, had a family. I mean, that's amazing, right? He lived, I guess, a normal life.
Apparently so, yes. I mean, it's an incredible achievement. And in fact, one of the little details I like about that operation in particular is that the surgeon, who really didn't know what he was up against, he just knew that he'd had a very bad accident. He was preparing for the operation. It was a surgeon called Elias Samuel Cooper, surgeon from San Francisco. And as he was preparing, he was choosing his instruments, and he found himself, for no reason he could realize, he didn't know why, but he found himself drawn to this strange pair of forceps, this long pair of forceps, and he thought, well, I'll put them in my pocket, but I don't think I'll need them. And when it came to the moment of truth, when he'd actually found the piece of metal, it was in a very difficult part of the body to reach. He suddenly remembered that he had these forceps in his pocket, and he drew them out. And he said that in retrospect, it was almost as if he'd had some sort of divine revelation, and it was only for that reason that he had the right instrument to hand when he needed to take the piece of metal out of the patient's chest.
Amazing. There's another one too you talk about in the book. This is even maybe more incredible. Somebody, I guess he had frostbite, he had 2 legs amputated, and again another operation without any anesthetic, and I guess the patient didn't even scream, right? He just was talking about the blade, but he didn't say he was in any pain. How did that happen?
Well, I think yes, this is a man who fell asleep drunk. After a night of drinking, he fell asleep with his feet in a puddle in London in freezing cold weather in December or January. And what had probably happened, he got frostbite, and I think the blood supply had been cut off to his feet for so many hours that they were completely dead and had no sensation at all. And it was a period before there was such a thing as anaesthetic, so the surgeon had to take off his legs. And the first time he took his saw to the man's leg, he said something along the lines of "E, it's sharp," meaning that the blade was sharp, and it didn't hurt, but he was impressed by how quickly it went through. But there's a nice line in that case where the patient asked the surgeon if he could maybe cut his legs off a bit higher, cut more of the leg off, because he then said that he'd have less far to fall when he was drunk. So he certainly had a practical mind to him, this patient.
Boy, it's amazing. And again, these were taken from the 1800s, 1900s, and in the book you have the original, I guess the doctors wrote out what they did, right? Their medical logs, I guess if that's the right term. So you kind of have that in there, and then you kind of put it in more layman's terms that we can understand, the reader, but some of those logs are a little bit difficult to understand, I imagine, or what they were doing.
Yes, I mean, I wanted to... All these cases are genuine case reports from old medical journals. So wherever possible, I have used the doctor's own words to describe them, because a lot of these descriptions are very vivid. They are first-hand accounts written by somebody who actually witnessed what was going on themselves. And doctors at the time, they really took a pride in describing things clearly and accurately, and also often with a few little literary flourishes as well. So I've used quite a lot of those original reports, but as you say, some of them are quite difficult to understand because doctors like using jargon, and particularly in the 19th century there were a lot of Latin words, a lot of specialist terms. And one of my favourites, incidentally, is an American doctor invented a word which is, he called it paruria erratica, was a condition he thought he'd identified. And what it means in English, it's a Latin phrase, but what it means in English is wandering disorder of urination.
Yeah.
And the wandering disorder of urination was this woman who started to emit urine from all over her body, from her eyes and her ears and her nose and all sorts of bits of her body. But I just like that idea of inventing a term to describe this condition.
It sounds a little bit better than what other terms you could use, I guess, right? But
it's probably for the best.
Yes. Well, you have a lot of those in there as well. And I guess we should just touch on briefly the title of the book, The Mystery of the Exploding Teeth. That's the one I guess most people are probably going to be intrigued with. Can you give a quick description of what that's about?
Yes, I found this in an old journal called Dental Cosmos, which was actually the first American journal dedicated to dentistry. And it was a dentist called W.H. Atkinson, who came from Springfield, Pennsylvania. And he had a patient who was a middle-aged priest who suddenly developed this terrible toothache. And there's a great description of him running up and down his garden, howling like a beast because it hurt so much, and plunging his head under the waterfall in the hope that the cold water would ease his pain. And the pain was only relieved the following day when his tooth exploded with this sound which is described as like a report, like a pistol shot. And the interesting question is what on earth was going on there, because the same dentist encountered several other patients who had a very similar experience where a tooth exploded. And it is a bit of a mystery, hence the title, but there is just this strange, intriguing possibility that it could be something to do with the chemicals that dentists used to make fillings in the 19th century. Maybe these were in some way explosive or flammable.
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating book filled with a lot of stories like that. The Mystery of the Exploding Teeth and other curiosities from the history of medicine. We've been talking with Thomas Morris today. I should also say, in addition to being a writer, a medical historian, also a fellow radio guy. So you've been with the BBC, or were with the BBC, so always good to talk to a fellow radio guy, Thomas. But where can people get the book? Do you have a website?
Yes, I have a website. The book is available in bookstores this week. It's released this week, and they'll be able to order it in for you, I'm sure, if it's not on the shelves there. But my website is thomas-morris.uk, where you can see a selection of other stories as well.
Great. We'll also put a link on our website. But Thomas, pleasure talking with you. Hopefully we can do it again. Thanks for being with us today.
Great. Thank you, and you.
Thank you for joining us today on Talk Across America. Please visit our website at dougmilesmedia.com for more great interviews and content. And if you're interested in any of the books we talk about on the program, please click the Amazon link on our website. It helps support the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again real soon here from beautiful Sarasota, Florida.
I'm Stan Brock. 30 years ago, I formed Remote Area Medical to help people overseas. But then we found generations of families in America isolated by poverty from the health care they need. Together, we can take dental, vision, and medical help to 1 million adults and their kids, right here at home in the United States of America.